Welcome to Hope Springs Eternal, where we're having positive conversations about the United Methodist Church. Today we're interviewing Bishop Kenneth Carder. He served United Methodist congregations in East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia for 32 years, including Pleasant View in Abingdon, Concord in Farragut, and First Church in Oak Ridge. While serving at Church Street United Methodist Church in Knoxville in 1992, he was elected to the episcopacy and assigned to the Nashville area and the Mississippi area. Upon retiring from the episcopacy in 2004, he joined the faculty of Duke Divinity School. Dr. Carder has authored 6 books and numerous articles in diverse journals. His latest book was published in 2019, and it was called Ministry with the Forgotten, Dementia Through a Pastoral Theological Lens. We are so glad to have Bishop Kenneth Carder with us today, and we hope that this conversation blesses you as we continue to have positive conversations about the United Methodist Church. Well, welcome to Hope Springs Eternal, and we have with us Bishop Ken Carder. I'm so excited. I've read several of his books, and I'm just looking forward to having this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ken.
I'm delighted to be with you, Natalie. Thanks for the opportunity to join you.
So my first question is, what brought you to the United Methodist Church? And just tell me a little bit about your call to ministry.
All right. What I can say it very briefly, I was brought into the United Methodist. It was the Methodist Church when I joined it, but I came into the Methodist Church from a very, very rigid other denomination as a child, and I came into the Methodist Church, which was located just down the road from where I lived. When my parents went back to that particular church, I asked if I could go to the Methodist church that was within walking distance where a few of my friends went. I was only 10 years old at the time, and they permitted me to go to that church. And I'm in the Methodist church today because I was greeted my first Sunday entering the Sunday school class. I was greeted with a hug by Mrs. Mahoney. And I can even tell you what the title of, or what the lesson was about that day. It was about the Good Shepherd. And she told the story with the picture of the shepherd carrying the little lost lamb. And she said, in the midst of telling that story, she said, God is like that shepherd who goes out in search of little lost lambs and carries them back into the fold. It had never occurred to me that God was like a shepherd who carries little lost lambs. I felt like a little lost lamb, and Mrs. Mahoney became the shepherd that welcomed me into the fold. I thought God was like that landlord who held me over a rain barrel to teach me to respect him, and those hellfire and damnation preachers who held me over the pit of hell if I didn't do exactly and believe exactly as I was supposed to. So I became a Methodist because Mrs. Mahoney welcomed me in a Sunday school class, and I never missed a day in Sundays or a Sunday in Sunday school after that until I was in college.
Wow.
So and that also relates to my call. That little congregation, McKinley Methodist Church in Washington County, Tennessee, which no longer exists, by the way, but that little Methodist church felt like home to me. It was a place where I felt welcomed. It was a place where I felt energized. It was a place that offered me opportunities. I'm a first-generation high school graduate. It was the first generation that had a vision of education for me. It connected me with people beyond that little rural church. And well, I guess my call was a gradual thing over time. As I moved through my youth and college years, I wondered if I should be a journalist. I liked to write. I wondered if I should be a social worker. And I thought about, well, I'd like to be a teacher. Well, it became evident to me that being a pastor enabled you to be all of those. And also, it's what you're aware of, I'm sure, of Frederick Buechner's definition of a calling. It's where your deep gladness and the world's hunger meet. And I felt my deep gladness was right there in that little church where I was accepted, where I was given a vision of a much broader world, where I was connected with even people beyond that local church in our connectional system. And I felt a sense of gladness about that. And I felt that the world needs a church like this. The world needs the gospel embodied in congregations like this. So that was my call to ministry. And it came also through another person who helped influence me. And that was our pastor, John Y. Bacon, who was the pastor during my years in high school. And he helped me through that process.
Wow, what a story! So you talk so with so much passion about how much you love. I mean, I can tell how much you love the United Methodist Church. Tell us more about why you love the United Methodist Church and why you are staying United Methodist.
Well, the United Methodist Church has been my home. It's been my ecclesial parent in a sense that has. It birthed me, nurtured me. I was baptized in the Methodist Church then at 12, after I'd been attending McKinley for 2 years. It gave me my birth in the church itself, and it nurtured me all of these years. And I loved the Methodist Church and then became the United Methodist Church because I found it and have found it over the years to be a place of acceptance and unconditional love and radical love of God. Yes, it has its faults. And I know the church is underside. I mean, my first job in the church I was the janitor of that little Methodist church, but I then became a pastor and I was elected a bishop. Now, you can judge whether I went up or down. I think, as Henry Nouwen says, the call to Christian discipleship is a call to downward mobility. So, it was through the church that I got a new vision of what the world could be like. It was in the church that I met my wife, Linda, who we were married for 58 years. And we met at a senior youth assembly at Emory Henry College. And it was the church that helped me go to seminary. I mean, it nurtured me. It was my home. And I love it, its goal, its aspiration of being a community that loves as Christ loves us. It falls short of that. I know the underside. I know the conflicts. I've been part of those conflicts. But the church, the Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church, its aspiration is to love one another as Christ loves us. It's to be a community that forms people in love for God and neighbor, as John Wesley so aptly expressed it. But also, I love its theology of grace. You see, we live in a culture of law. We live in a culture of trying to live up to expectations and demands. But the United Methodist Church, at the heart of our theology, is a robust theology of grace. And that is God's unconditional gift, generous gift of God's presence and power to create, to liberate, to restore, to reconcile communities, individuals, and entire cosmos. So that grace is at the heart of our theology. So I love that. I love our connection, that we are connected to one another because we live in an interconnected world, and the United Methodist Church seeks to reflect the interconnectedness of God's creation. That is, no local church is totally the body of Christ. It's the whole church. And so we are interconnected, and we live that out in our connectionalism. as I said, that little small congregation where we have 12 to 15 youth in my MYF in those days, but we were part of a sub-district, a district, a conference, and then I even attended a national youth convocation at Purdue University in 1957 of 5,000 young people from around the world gathering. It was the first time I heard an African-American preach. Wow. And that African-American preacher was James Thomas, Bishop James Thomas, who later became my friend and mentor and colleague in the Council of Bishops. So not only did I meet my wife, Linda, but I also met a whole network of worldwide disciples seeking to love God and love neighbor, seeking to be a community that in which the love of God is not only talked about, but lived. So that's what I love about and many others. One other thing I would mention, I grew up in my early years, the essence of salvation was to save my individual soul, so I'd go to heaven when I die. Now, I don't diminish the importance of that at all, but Wesley, the United Methodist Church, its image of salvation is much broader than that. It's the transformation of human hearts, communities, and the entire cosmos into the reign that made known in Jesus Christ, a reign of compassion, justice, generosity, and joy, and mutual flourishing. So that's, in essence, I love United Methodist theology. I've taught it, I've written about it, and yes, it keeps me focused on what is important. So I could go on forever, a long time. But we don't have a long time.
Oh, thank you so much. And you're talking about just the some of the difficulties, and you've seen the underbelly and everything like that. And we're going through such a transition right now in the Methodist Church. What's your hope for the future?
Oh, I have tremendous hope for the future. I am part of, at the present time, I'm part of a task force of the Council of Bishops, charged with the responsibility of looking to what do we want the United Methodist Church, or what should the United Methodist Church look like beyond this present conflicts and disaffiliations and divisions, which are deeply regretful. I lament what's going on in our church today. Just at the time that the world needs a community that can demonstrate that we can live together and love one another while disagreeing. It's so unfortunate, maybe even sinful, that we are dividing, that we are saying you have to agree on all these issues. You see, as Wesley said, though we may not think alike, can we not love alike? We are called to love as Christ loved us. And Jesus the Christ even washed the feet of the one who betrayed him. That's what we're called to do too. We are called to love one another, nurture one another, and grow in Christ likeness. So I think it's unfortunate, but I have hope that we're going to hang on to that vision, and we're going to be that church. The United Methodist Church is going to be we're going to continue to work toward that aspiration of being this community that welcomes all, because all are loved by God, have been redeemed in Jesus Christ. And I have the hope of that. One thing I would really like for us to do, we began, Methodism didn't begin in a quarrel over doctrines. or particular beliefs. We began as a renewal movement within the Anglican Church. And we began among the people on the margins. What I would like for my vision for the United Methodist Church is that we would recover our presence and heritage among the marginalized. And every community, in fact, all of us feel marginalized in one way or the other, but every community has its populations of the marginalized. My wife died of dementia, from dementia three and a half years ago. People living with cognitive impairments, the poor, the imprisoned, those who are frail, those are the very ones God has chosen as primary means of divine grace and mission. I mean, as the Apostle Paul said, God has chosen the foolish to confound the wise, the weak to confound the strong. And God is the one who defends the orphans, the widows, and the sojourners. And Jesus made it very clear. If you want to know me, visit the imprisoned, minister to the poor, clothe the naked, give food to the hungry, announce good news to the poor, release to the captives, sight to the blind. And Wesley emphasizing, the commands of Jesus, love God and love neighbor. I envision the United Methodist Church recovering our heritage among those on the margins, not as our projects, not as our mission projects to give Christmas baskets to. Those may be important, but we are to receive their gifts. They are the means of our transformation. I was very much a part of the Episcopal Initiative on Children and Poverty. I wrote the foundation document for that. And the primary goal stated in that mission is to transform the church, the United Methodist Church, in response to the God who is among the least of these. That's still my hope for the church. I also hope that we will become a center of prophetic dialogue. I'm convinced that prophetic ministry today is dialogical. That is bringing people together of differing perspectives in an attitude and a spirit of mutual respect and a mutual longing for a broader vision of the beloved community, and where we can address these controversial and very important and life changing issues. We can dialogue about them and move toward more of a common understanding. None of us has the final answer on much of anything. The older I get, the more I realize how little I know, and that everything I know is still incomplete. We on every issue, just name whatever it is, and we see through a glass darkly. And therefore, we need one another to really understand the fullness of God, of God's vision for us. And anyone who claims to know completely the mind of God has the wrong God. None of our minds are big enough to get around this mysterious, or this, what Rudolf Otto calls the mysterium tremendum, this tremendous mystery we call God, or we call love. But even love, how it works out in any one particular issue, requires some dialogue. It requires that I need to know where you see that, your experience of that. So I long for the church to be that. I also, I can name one more, that we'll be less bureaucratic. We're over bureaucratized. with one of the most bureaucratized, and it's been growing. When I started out in ordination, the discipline I could almost carry in my coat pocket. And now it gets thicker and the pages get thinner. We have replaced liturgy with legislation. We assume the authority of that legislation has more authority than our liturgy does, or than our devotional life. So I hope we can become less bureaucratic and less dependent upon voting on things, less dependent on legislation, because legislation and voting inevitably are power plays, and they end up being winners and losers. I want us all to be winners in God's kingdom, and that's where God, I think, is working and moving us. And that means we've got to remain theologically centered. We've got to stay focused on these are the most important theological questions that I've spent my life struggling with, and I'm still struggling with. Who is God? Where is God? What is God doing? And what's my appropriate response to who God is, where God is, and God's mission? And I think if we can stay focused on that, we've got a marvelous future. It's ever expanding.
Well, thank you so much. We're talking about the future, and, we talk about there has been some discouragement going on within clergy and laity during this time. If a clergy person or a laity person came to you and said, I need one word of encouragement, what would that be during this time?
I would say the future of the body of Christ is not in doubt. It has been raised. Now, the institutional manifestation of that body is always going to be in jeopardy and is always going to be changing. And that's good. Otherwise, we'll worship the institution and not the Christ, whose body we are called to be. And I would add one other word. When you're discouraged and when you think there's no hope, or when you're in doubt, love. I learned in my 12-year journey with my wife in her dementia, I learned that no act of love is ever wasted. So if you're in doubt or if you're discouraged, find someone who needs encouragement. Go to someone who needs to be included, and let them know you care. Express some authentic caring and love. In other words, do what Matthew 25 says. Go visit the prison. Go feed the hungry. Clothe the naked. Enter into dialogue with someone you disagree with, and let them know. Be more convinced be more determined that they will know that you love them than you are determined to convince them that you are right. In other words, when in doubt, when discouraged, love. And remember, when you are loving, you are participating in the flow of God's love. And you are participating in the triune God's dance of love. That's what we're called to be, to participate in the triune God's ongoing dance of love. And sometimes in that dance, you lead, sometimes you follow, and sometimes you are lifted or you lift. but it's to participate in that dance. And I'm convinced we have a bright future if we will love one another as Christ loves us.
Thank you so much, Bishop Carder, for joining us. And thank you so much for those who are watching. We hope this conversation blessed you. Thank you so much again. We appreciate having you, sir.
Thank you very much. And all the best to you.